Tuesday, November, 6:15 in the morning, 29 degrees. Ray was locking his patrol truck when the dog appeared at the far end of the lot. Shepherd mix, black and tan, moving in that low, deliberate trot that working dogs use when they have somewhere to be. It didn't slow down, didn't sniff the ground, walked in a straight line directly toward him, stopped 4 feet away and sat down, and then it placed something on the ground between them. Ray's hand went still on his keys. He looked down. A woman's glove. The dog sat perfectly motionless and did not blink. Just sat in the cold and waited, the way a soldier waits for orders, like it had been carrying this thing for miles and had finally found the right man. By the time Ray understood what that glove meant, it was already too late to pretend none of it happened. This story will not leave you the same. Stay with us. Ray Mitchell was not a man people described as warm. They described him as thorough, dependable, the kind of officer who showed up to every shift 6 minutes early and left the paperwork done. In 22 years at Millhaven County Sheriff's Department, he had missed 4 days. 2 were for his mother's funeral. 1 was a mandatory quarantine during the bad winter of 2019. The 4th, and this he had never told anyone, was the day his K9 partner, a Belgian Malinois named Colt, was put down after a bone cancer diagnosis that came out of nowhere in a cold October. Ray had driven to the vet, sat in the waiting room for 11 minutes, and then stood in that small exam room while it happened. He had driven home. He had sat in his kitchen with a glass of water he never drank. And the next morning he went back to work. He didn't request a new K9 partner. His supervisor asked twice. Ray said he preferred working solo. No one pushed it. He was 54 years old. He lived alone in a house on Greer Road, 7 miles from the substation. The house had 3 bedrooms, and he used 1. He had a TV he turned on for the weather. He had a coffee maker that ran on a timer and was always done before he got to the kitchen. He had 4 plates, 2 of everything else, and a habit of eating dinner standing at the counter because sitting at a table for 1 felt like a statement he wasn't ready to make. He wasn't unhappy. That was the thing people got wrong about men like Ray. He wasn't drowning. He was just level, flat and steady and moving forward. Like a road in Kansas. No drama, no detours, no surprises. That was the life Ray Mitchell had built after Colt died. And it held, right up until a 60-pound shepherd mix appeared in a parking lot on a 29-degree morning and placed something at his feet. 3 things Ray Mitchell did not know that Tuesday. He did not know there was a woman missing. He did not know she had been missing for over 30 hours. And he did not know that this dog, this animal that had appeared from nowhere, had been with her when it happened. Thank you for being here. Please subscribe and like this video. And before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love knowing who's out there listening. Ray crouched down slowly. The dog didn't flinch. It held its position and watched his face with the kind of focus that working dogs have. Specific, unblinking, professional. Ray had spent 4 years working with Colt, and he knew that look. That look meant, I am not done. That look meant, pay attention. Between the dog's front paws, sitting on the cold asphalt, was a woman's glove. Brown leather, left hand. The lining was fleece, the kind that comes in a set from a department store. The stitching along the thumb was partially torn, and the palm was caked with dried mud. Not brown mud, dark mud, the kind that comes from creek beds and low ground. There was a dark stain near the wrist, small, the color of rust. Ray didn't touch it yet. He looked at the dog. The dog looked at him. "Where'd you get this?" Ray asked quietly, not expecting an answer, filling the silence the way people do when they don't know what else to do. The dog stood up, turned in the direction it had come from, took 3 steps, stopped, looked back. Ray's jaw tightened. He had seen this before. He had seen Colt do exactly this. That specific sequence, the turn and wait, the look back, on 4 separate searches in 4 different years. It was not a trick. It was not coincidence. It was a working dog communicating one clear instruction. Follow me. Ray picked up the glove with his shirt cuff, held it closer. The stain near the wrist was definitely blood. Dried old by at least 12 hours, but blood. He stood up and looked around the parking lot. Empty. The road beyond was empty. The tree line at the edge of the lot was dark and still. There was no car, no owner calling for a dom, nothing. Just a shepherd mix standing in the cold, waiting for a sheriff's deputy to make a decision. Ray pulled out his radio. He keyed it halfway, then stopped. He thought about how this would sound. He thought about the paperwork. He thought about his sergeant, who had told him twice last month that Ray needed to stop logging solo observations and start running everything through proper intake. He thought about the glove. He thought about the stain. He set the radio back on his belt. "All right," he said, "show me." The dog turned and moved, and Ray Mitchell followed it out of the parking lot and into the dark tree line at 6:21 in the morning, with no backup, no authorization, and no idea what he was walking toward. If you've ever followed your gut when everything around you said stop, you already know the feeling he had in his chest right then. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. The dog was covering ground fast, not running, but purposeful. That low swinging trot that said it knew exactly where it was going. Ray matched its pace, one hand on his flashlight, scanning the ground ahead. The woods behind the substation were not wild. They were a strip of land between the county road and an old drainage easement, maybe 200 yards wide. People walked dogs there. Kids cut through it after school. It wasn't threatening terrain. But at 6 in the morning in November in the dark, following a dog he didn't know, Ray's instincts were running. He counted seconds. 50, 60, 70. The dog stopped. Ray stopped. The dog was at the edge of a dry creek bed, 8 feet wide. The near bank dropped about 3 feet down to a flat floor of packed mud and dead leaves. Ray swept his flashlight beam across it. Nothing. He looked at the dog. The dog looked down into the creek bed. Then it looked at Ray, then back down. Ray moved to the edge and dropped the beam lower. That's when he saw the second glove. Right glove. Same brown leather. Sitting in the creek bed 12 feet from where the bank crumbled, like someone had stepped too close to the edge and gone over. Beside it, a phone, face down. Screen cracked. Ray's hand went to his radio. This time he didn't stop. "Dispatch, this is Mitchell. I need to run a welfare check. Possible medical incident. I'm in the easement behind Substation 4. I need someone to pull any reports of a missing female, last 24 to 48 hours, and I need another unit." He climbed down into the creek bed. The dog followed, landing silently on the mud beside him. Ray crouched over the phone, not touching it yet, just looking. The screen was spider-cracked, top right corner, like it had been dropped hard. The case was pink silicone, worn. There were stickers on the back, a sunflower, a paw print, the number 11. Someone's phone, someone's who hadn't come back for it. Ray looked at the Pete, standing 2 feet away, watching him steadily. "You were with her," Ray said. The dog looked down the creek bed, then back at Ray. One quiet sound, not a bark. Something lower, something urgent. Ray rose. "Lead," he said. The creek bed curved south and narrowed. Ray followed the dog at a jog now, flashlight bouncing, radio crackling in his earpiece with dispatch running searches. The mud beneath his boots was soft in places. Recent rain, probably Sunday. And in the soft sections he could see impressions. Shoe prints, small, narrow. Woman's shoe, moving quickly, uneven stride. And beside them, paw prints. The dog's prints. They had been here together. His earpiece crackled. "Mitchell Dispatch. No active missing persons filed for Millhaven in the last 48. Nearest flag is a welfare check request out of Greer Township. Came in yesterday morning. A Rosa Hartley, 67, hasn't responded to family calls since Sunday evening. Family lives out of state. They phoned it in, but local wasn't able to make contact yet." Ray ran the name. Rosa Hartley, Sunday evening. That was 34 hours ago. "What's her address?" he said into the radio. 1240 Easement Road, just north of the county line. Ray stopped walking. He looked around at the creek bed, at the trees, At the curve of the land, Easement Road was the road that ran parallel to this drainage easement. 1240 Easement Road was less than a quarter-mile north of where he was standing. He looked at the dog. The dog was already moving again. Faster now. Copy dispatch. Send units to 1240 Easement Road and route them to the easement behind it. And get EMS on standby. Possible medical. He ran. The dog broke into a full run the moment Ray did, as if it had been waiting for that signal, as if it had been holding back until it knew the man beside it was finally committed. They moved together down the creek bed, Ray's flashlight throwing shadows against the banks, his boots slamming into the cold mud. 90 seconds in, the dog veered right, scrambled up the bank. Ray grabbed a root and pulled himself up behind it, breathing hard. They came out of the creek bed into a narrow field, frost-dead grass, a wire fence at the far edge, and beyond the fence a small house with dark windows, white siding, a covered porch, a bird bath in the side yard with ice in the basin. The dog ran straight to the porch. Ray was right behind it. The front door was closed. He knocked. "Sheriff's Department. Anyone home?" He waited 4 seconds. Knocked again, harder. "Ma'am, Millhaven Sheriff. If you can hear me, please come to the door." Nothing. The dog had moved off the porch. It was at the corner of the house, looking toward the backyard. Ray followed, around the corner, down the side yard, through the dead grass, past a small garden bed, and stopped. There was a woman on the ground at the back of the yard, near a small utility shed, half sitting against the wooden wall of the shed, with her legs extended in front of her, and her head dropped to the left. She was wearing a brown coat, no hat, no gloves. The gloves were at the creek, Ray remembered, and something about that detail hit him hard, and she was completely still. The dog ran to her, pressed its entire body against her side, let out one long, broken sound. Ray was already on his knees, fingers at her neck. A pulse. Slow. Weak. Present. "Dispatch, I have the subject. Backyard of 1240 Easement. She's alive, unconscious. Possible hypothermia. I need EMS now." He stripped his jacket off without thinking and lay it over her. "Ma'am, can you hear me? You're okay, I'm right here, I've got you." She didn't respond. Her lips were pale. Her face was gray. She had been outside for a long time, maybe since Sunday night. That was 34 hours in November cold. Ray put his hand on her shoulder, careful, steady, and kept talking. He didn't know if she could hear him. He talked anyway. That was the training. Keep the voice going. Let them know they're not alone. The dog had pressed its entire body into her side and wasn't moving, warming her. It had been doing that all night. Ray looked at the training for one moment. The voice looked back. Its ribs were visible. Its paws were cracked from the cold and the creek mud. It had been outside every minute she had. It had stayed with her. It had tried to keep her alive. And when it understood she needed more than warmth, when it understood that she needed a person, it had left her long enough to find one. Ray put his hand briefly on the dog's head. The dog leaned into it slightly and then looked back at the woman. Sirens in the distance. 48 seconds. Rosa Hartley's fingers moved, just slightly, just a twitch against the frost-dead grass. But Ray saw it, and his chest released something he hadn't realized he had been holding shut. "I've got you," he said again. "Help is almost here." The next 10 minutes were controlled chaos. 2 units came in from the road, EMS behind them. The paramedics moved in fast. Warming packs, vitals, oxygen. Ray stepped back and let them work. One of the younger deputies tried to move the dog, and the whiskey planted its feet and would not go. The paramedic looked at Ray. Ray shook his head. Let him stay. They let the dog stay. He stood at the edge of the yard while the paramedics worked, watching Rosa's face for signs of consciousness. One of the medics called out, "Core temp, severe hypothermia, frostbite in the fingers, dehydration, probable fall." Her left ankle was swollen and discolored, likely broken. She had fallen trying to get inside on Sunday night. The back door handle, Ray noticed, had a cracked grip, stripped bolt, the kind that sticks in cold weather. She'd probably been locked out. Reached for her phone. Phone was gone. She'd tried to walk for help. Made it to the creek bank before she went over. 34 hours in the cold, with one dog who wouldn't leave. The stretcher came around the side of the house. The dog followed it. When they loaded Rosa into the ambulance, the dog sat at the back doors and looked at Ray. Not asking for permission, reporting. He had done what he could do, now it was Ray's turn. Ray looked at the paramedic. She has family? The medic nodded. I'll need a number. He looked at at the woman on the stretcher, at the broken door handle and the frost-covered yard. One deputy had his notebook out. You need a statement, Ray? Ray was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said, but not from me. He looked at the dog again. From whoever owns that animal. The deputy frowned. You think someone owns it? Ray looked at the paw prints worn into the porch boards. The food dish, empty, bone dry, just inside the back gate. The way the dog had moved through this yard with the ease of an animal that knew every inch of it. This isn't a stray, Ray said quietly. This dog lives here. The deputy looked at the bum, then at the empty yard, then at Ray. Well, he said. Yeah, Ray said. That was the first moment Ray understood. This wasn't a dog that had wandered into a crisis. This was a boy that had been part of one from the beginning, and had done what it could with the tools it had. He stood in that backyard for a long moment after the ambulance pulled away, the cold coming back in now that the adrenaline was stepping down. And he looked at the dog sitting by the back gate. The dog looked at him. Neither of them moved for several seconds. He hadn't saved her. The dog had. Ray had just been the right man in the right parking lot, the one who had crouched down and gone quiet and let an animal tell him something. All right, Ray said finally, let's go. The dog stood up, followed him to the truck, waited beside the passenger door with a patience Ray had not seen in an animal in 3 years. He opened the door. The dog got in. Ray sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. He looked at the dome. The dog looked forward. You did good, Ray said. The dog's ear moved, that was all. Ray started the truck. It wasn't until he was pulling out onto the county road that he realized his hand was shaking. Not from the cold he could manage. The shaking was something else. It was relief, pure and simple. Relief that she was alive. Relief that something had worked. Relief that he had followed the instinct he almost talked himself out of in that parking lot. He thought about the moment he had reached for his radio and then stopped. He thought about what would have happened if he had filed it through intake. Rosa Hartley would have died in her backyard. He looked at the dog. You didn't let that happen, he said quietly. The dog didn't answer, just sat in the passenger seat of a county sheriff's truck and looked at the road. The way Colt used to. The hospital was 40 minutes from Millhaven. Ray drove there that afternoon. He had gone back to the substation first, filed the initial report, briefed his sergeant, handled the questions that come when you make an uncoordinated entry on a welfare check without prior logging. His sergeant had stared at him across the desk for a long moment, then looked at the game woman, which had not left Ray's side. Then looked back at Ray. She alive? The sergeant said. She's alive, Ray said. The sergeant wrote something in his notebook. I'll note your discretionary action is justified given time-sensitive indicators. That was the closest thing to a compliment Ray had gotten from him in 4 years. The dog rode in the truck to the hospital. Ray cracked the window and told it to stay. It watched him walk to the entrance with an expression that was not quite obedience and not quite permission, but something in between, like it was allowing this. The ICU waiting room smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. A nurse directed Ray to the family area. Rosa Hartley had regained consciousness at the hospital, briefly, the nurse said, before sedation for pain management. Her daughter was flying in from Phoenix. Her son was driving from Columbus. The nurse showed Ray to the waiting room and brought him a cup of coffee he didn't ask for. He sat in a plastic chair and turned the cup in his hands. The daughter arrived first. Her name was Carmen. She was in her early 40s, still in her travel clothes, dark circles under her eyes and a tension in her jaw that said she had been holding herself together since the flight. She sat down across from Ray and folded her hands in her lap. "You found her," she said. "The dog found her," Ray said. "I just followed." Carmen was quiet for a moment. "Atlas," she said. Ray looked up. "His name is Atlas," Carmen said. "He was my mother's dog. She got him 3 years ago after my father passed. She said she wasn't going to get a dog. Said it was too much work at her age." A faint, broken smile. "She had him for a week before she told us his name. She never told us what made her choose Atlas." Ray thought about a 60-pound shepherd mix in a parking lot at 6 in the morning, placing a glove at a stranger's feet like it was a dispatch report. Atlas. Of course that was the name. "Was he trained?" Ray asked. "As a working dog?" "Not professionally. My mother went to obedience classes with him for 2 years. She was, she was very serious about it. Said a dog that couldn't communicate was a dog that couldn't be trusted." Carmen looked at her hands. "I used to think that was just something she said." Ray nodded. He looked at the floor. He thought about what the mind had communicated in that parking lot, in that creek bed, in that backyard. The sequence of it, the precision. He thought about what it had cost the dog to leave her. "He stayed with her all night," Ray said. "In the cold. He kept her warm. And then, at some point, he made the decision to leave, to go find help. That's not..." He stopped. "That's not a small thing for an animal to do. Leave the person they're protecting. Trust that leaving is the right call." Carmen's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together. "My mother used to say he was the smartest thing she'd ever met," she said. "She talked to him, like he could understand. My brother thought it was, an old woman alone. But she wasn't confused. She was right." They sat in the waiting room for 2 hours. Carmen's brother arrived, and Ray answered their questions. The same questions twice. The same details, the same accounting of what had happened that morning. He didn't dress it up. He didn't make himself the center of the story. He said, "The dog brought me a glove. The white led me to the creek. The dog led me to your mother. The dog stayed with her when I stepped back for EMS." The brother shook his head slowly at the end of it. "You're telling me Atlas found a cop?" "Atlas found me," Ray said. "I'm not sure it was about being a cop." The brother looked at him. Ray said, "He walked past 3 other people to get to me. There was a woman getting into her car on the other end of the lot. There was a deputy coming off night shift at the side door. He walked past both of them." Ray looked at the wall. I don't know what he was reading in me, but he read something. Ray thought about Colt on the drive back, about the 4 years he had spent with that dog in that truck, working searches, learning to read the signals, that an animal communicating something was more precise and more honest than a person, and it required you to set down your assumptions and just pay attention. Most people never learn that. Ray had learned it with Colt. He had spent 3 years forgetting it. And then on a Tuesday morning in November, a dog had walked across a parking lot and picked him back up by the sleeve. He wasn't chosen because of his badge. He was chosen because when Atlas stopped in front of him and sat down, Ray had gone quiet and looked. He had crouched down in the cold and looked at the animal and let it tell him something. That was it. That was all of it. He had been available to receive the message. 2 days after the hospital visit, Ray got a call from Carmen. Her mother was stable, out of ICU, starting physical therapy on the ankle. The doctors said she had arrived in the narrow window. Another few hours would have been a different conversation. "She wants to see you," Carmen said. "She doesn't have to do that." "She wants to," Carmen said, "and she wants to ask you something." Ray drove back to the hospital the following Saturday. He brought Atlas, who had been staying at Ray's house on Greer Road since the morning of the incident, sleeping on a blanket in the corner of the kitchen, eating twice a day, riding in the truck when Ray went to work. The dog had settled into the routine with no adjustment period, as if the routine had been waiting for him. Rosa Hartley was sitting up in the hospital bed when Ray came in. She was smaller than he expected, slight, white-haired, with quick brown eyes that tracked him the moment he stepped through the door. The bruising from the fall had moved into its yellow stage and her ankle was in a boot, but she was upright and present and looking at him like she already knew everything she needed to know. Atlas made a sound when he saw her. Not a bark. Something lower than that. Older than that. He crossed the room in 6 steps and put his head in her lap. Rosa Hartley placed both hands on his face and looked at him for a long moment without speaking. Ray stood by the door and let that be what it was. When she finally looked up, her eyes were bright and still. "You're the deputy," she said. "Ray Mitchell." "Yes, ma'am." "He chose you." "Yes, ma'am." She looked back at Atlas. "He's never gone to a stranger before. In 3 years." She scratched behind his ears. "I was conscious the first night. In and out. He wouldn't move off me. I could feel him breathing." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. The memory of lying in the cold and the dark, and the one warm thing that stayed. "I told him to go bowing. I said, go find somebody, Atlas. Go get help. He wouldn't move." She paused. "And then in the morning he did. I felt it when he left, like a light going out." She looked at Ray again. "I think he waited for the right person." Ray didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Can I ask what happened? If it's not too hard." "It's fine," she said it firmly. "I was locking up the shed, Sunday evening, 6 o'clock, maybe 6:30. The door handle, it catches in the cold. I've been meaning to have it fixed for 2 years." A rueful expression. "It stuck. I jerked at it, lost my footing on the step, went down sideways, my ankle. And my phone had fallen out of my pocket on the way down, bounced over the bank into the creek. I could hear it land." She shook her head. "I couldn't put weight on the ankle. The back door, stuck in the cold too. I got to the porch and I couldn't get in and I couldn't walk for help, and it was getting dark." Ray thought about the door handle, the worn grip, the cold. "You were there all night." "All night and all the next day," she said. "I slept. I don't remember all of it. I remember Atlas against me, keeping me awake sometimes, letting me sleep sometimes, like he was managing it, like he had a plan." "He did," Ray said. Rosa looked at him steadily. "Carmen says you lost a K9. Ray hadn't expected that. He said nothing for a moment. "3 years ago, yes." "And you didn't get a new one?" "No." "Why?" Ray thought about the question, the real answer. "I didn't think I was ready to go through it again." Rosa was quiet. She looked at Atlas. She looked at Ray. "You know," she said, "dogs don't wait for you to be ready. They just decide you are." That landed somewhere in Ray's chest and stayed there. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "what was it you wanted to ask me?" She didn't answer right away. She looked at Atlas, who had settled his chin on the edge of the hospital bed with his eyes half closed. The pose of an animal that had been running on pure will for 34 hours and had finally, completely, put it down. "I'm going to be in physical therapy for 6 weeks," Rosa said, "and then at Carmen's for another month after that, while the house gets some things fixed. The door, some other things." She looked at Ray. "I can't take him with me to Carmen's. Her apartment doesn't allow dogs." Ray waited. "He needs somewhere to go," Rosa said. "Somewhere good. Somewhere he'll be understood." She looked at Ray with those quick, certain eyes. "He understood something about you in that parking lot. Something I believe in." A pause. "Will you take him while I recover?" Ray looked at Atlas. The dog opened one eye, looked at Ray, closed it again. "He's already at my house," Ray said. Rosa smiled. It was the first full smile he'd seen from her. "I know, Carmen told me." She held out her hand. Ray stepped forward and took it. Briefly, carefully, the handshake of two people making an agreement they both understand. "Take care of him," she said. "Already am," Ray said. The first night Atlas was on the blanket in the kitchen corner, Ray woke up at 2 in the morning and lay still in the dark for a moment trying to understand what had changed. Then he heard it, the soft exhale of an animal breathing in the next room, the small shift of a paw repositioning on a blanket. He lay there and listened to it for 10 minutes. Then he went back to sleep. In the morning he made coffee. He put food in the bowl he had bought at the feed store. Atlas ate with the particular focus of an animal that has experienced a period without certainty about the next meal. Then he sat and looked at Ray. Ray looked back. Don't look at me like that, Ray said. Atlas looked at him like that. They went out to the road for the morning walk, and that was that. That became the first morning of a routine that held for 6 weeks like something that had been waiting to exist. At the substation, someone had made a small laminated card with Atlas's photo and stuck it to the board near the shift roster. Someone else had written Deputy Atlas on it in marker. Ray had not taken it down. He drove back to Greer Road that evening with Atlas in the passenger seat. The dog looked out the window at the winter fields going past in the gray November light. Ray had the heat on, and the cab was warm, and there was no radio playing. And for the first time in a long time, a time Ray couldn't precisely measure, the truck did not feel empty. He thought about Rosa's words. They just decide you are. He had spent 3 years believing he wasn't ready. 3 years keeping the truck empty and the house quiet and the extra dishes in the cabinet. Not suffering, not miserable, just sealed off from the possibility of starting something that would end. Atlas had walked across a parking lot in 29-degree cold and decided differently. Ray glanced at the dog. The dog looked back, then looked at the road. You're going to be trouble, he said. Atlas made a sound that might have been agreement. The farmland scrolled past, the sky was the color of pewter. Somewhere ahead on Greer Road, there was a house with 3 empty bedrooms and a kitchen where a man stood at the counter eating alone. For 6 weeks at least, that would not be what it was. And Ray already knew, without examining it too closely, without putting it into a sentence he'd have to say out loud, that 6 weeks was not going to be enough. 6 weeks later, Rosa Hartley stood at the front door of her house on Easement Road. The door had a new handle, brushed steel, solid. Carmen had arranged it before Rosa came home, along with a stocked refrigerator, a new phone, and a carbon monoxide detector Ray had recommended over the phone one evening without thinking, and then felt slightly awkward about after he hung up. Rosa had called back 20 minutes later to say she'd ordered one. It was a Saturday, cold still, but the kind of cold that has stopped fighting. Early December, the landscape stripped back to its bones and quiet. Ray parked on the road and walked up the path. Atlas walked beside him, not ahead, not behind. Beside. The way he had every morning for 6 weeks on the road near Ray's house. Rosa saw Atlas come around the gate. She was using a cane still. Light pressure on the ankle, doctor's orders, and she stopped walking when she saw him. Atlas stopped too. They looked at each other from 20 feet apart, in the cold, in the gray morning light. Then Atlas walked to her, slowly. No sprint, no scramble. Just that steady, deliberate walk. The one that said, I know you. I have always known you. I was never not coming back. He pressed himself against her legs. Rosa put her hand on his head. Nobody said anything. Ray stood by the gate and looked at the bird bath with the new ice in the basin and let the moment be what it was. After a while, Rosa looked up. You didn't have to bring him, she said. I know, Ray said. She looked at him steadily. You could have kept him. Ray looked at Atlas. The dog had turned and was standing between them, looking from one to the other, back and forth. That same checking in, that same quiet presence he had carried through every morning of the past 6 weeks. He's yours, Ray said. Rosa was quiet. He always was, Ray said. She looked at Atlas, then back at Ray. Come inside, she said. I made coffee. Ray followed her up the porch steps. Atlas walked through the door like he had never left, like the 34 hours in the cold and the 6 weeks on Greer Road had been a detour, not a change. A mission run and now complete. He went to his bed in the corner of the kitchen and lay down. Ray sat at the kitchen table. There were 2 cups. Rosa poured without asking. They drank coffee for a while without talking, in the way that people do when talking would only dilute something. Outside, the winter fields were still. The bird bath held its disc of ice. The new door handle caught the light. Ray set his cup down. He looked at the dog in the corner, eyes half closed, chest rising and falling. He thought about a parking lot, a glove, a pulse at 34 hours. He thought about 3 empty bedrooms and a coffee maker on a timer, and a man who had convinced himself that flat was the same as fine. He put both hands around the coffee cup and looked at nothing in particular. Some doors stick in the cold, and some of them, if you wait long enough, get fixed. Atlas slept. Ray didn't pick up the cup again for a while. He didn't need to.